So we are still in part one of the book, The State of the World, The State of the World. This author likes to use our to make it personal, which is nice. Second one was our past defining our present. But when you think about our present, who is us? Who is our in this sense, right? If you think about cumulative carbon that determines the warming in a linear sense almost, most of the accumulated carbon has come from the industrialized world, Western world, global north, whatever word you want to use. And obviously the benefits have accrued to all of the global north as well as global south, even though it's an uneven distribution. So let's say we decided under the UNFCCC that 1990 is a good starting point for discussing emissions, future actions, nationally determined contributions, and so on. So now when we say our sustainability challenges, it shouldn't hide the fact that it is of course our sustainability challenge now, but the responsibilities have to be kind of kept in mind in terms of historical impacts, because it comes down to whether intellectual properties, technological innovations, financial assistance through loss and damage, and so on, actually will help the poorer countries, the global south, which need help because they are facing a lot of the impacts, even though their contribution to the to climate change is basically very low, right? So keeping that in mind, this is about our sustainability challenges. It's a kind of a chapter with a lot of words, but it's good because it has the history of how the negotiations started and how the sustainability definition, the concept, and disasters and risk have all evolved over time. So we'll look at the history with the meetings and some details on what each meeting did or tried to accomplish, and how the following meetings built on what was before, and how the timing of the meetings actually decided at the time something based on the context of the time and the state of the world at that time. So things have accelerated, and sense of urgency has been increasing, and so on. So we'll see that. So we'll basically, I mean that there is a lot of words, so it's okay, we'll keep reading, right? Our sustainability challenges then. There is no doubt that the development of society has left our world in a grave state. Although we have been faced by substantial sustainability challenges in the past, our current situation is both qualitatively and quantitatively different from the past that we looked at, the transformations pre-agrarian, agrarian, and industrial. Even in the industrial since 1750, we are now at a very different state. It is qualitatively different in the sense of much greater complexity of our contemporary challenges, and quantitatively different in the sense of much greater scale of these challenges in both spatial and temporal terms than ever before. So we are globally connected, so the cascades and the propagation of perturbations through the system is much more complex, the feedbacks in the Earth system sense, Earth naturals, or natural human system sense. And obviously challenges are also greater because the number of people that need attention in terms of these challenges is much larger. We are beyond 8 billion at this point, and we are still growing. The direct cause and effect relationships that generated the first sustainability challenge of having too many mouths to feed in relation to the available food that could be hunted or gathered in the accessible area have been replaced by complex non-linear networks of multiple cause and effect relationships, generating sustainability challenges that are much more difficult to both comprehend and address. So if typhoon hits Taiwan, this is an example I use all the time because there is a nice analysis on it. If a typhoon hits Philippines, then Philippines is a big supplier of coconut and coconut products to the rest of the world. Then that impact of typhoon propagates through the entire global system and has measurable impact on GDPs as well. So these are kind of hard to comprehend unless you do post facto analysis, and we're always trying to stay ahead with such analysis in terms of cascades of impacts, especially since these relationships often cut across sectoral, geographical, and administrative boundaries, which is the good example of Philippines and coconuts, which have become so ingrained in the way in which we look upon and understand our world that they restrict our ability to grasp the whole picture. So we jump from typhoon, some people talk about how it got stronger because of global warming, and then another group of people will look at the impact on economies and so on, and logistical chains, risks, etc. So we are kind of in silos in that sense. We have gone from the local sustainability challenges of our past to sustainability challenges that are experienced both globally and locally. This chapter attempts to give an overview of our main contemporary sustainability challenges, first as discussed on our world conferences, over the last 4 decades, focusing on the evolution of ideas concerning safety and sustainability in the international community. Then I present our boundaries for sustainability, drawing on the highly influential work of the scientific community and non-governmental organizations. So this author loves the idea of the planetary boundaries from Rockstrom et al. That is what he's talking about, highly influential frameworks and so on. But not everybody agrees about the details, but anyway, we'll come back to that. Okay, our challenges as discussed in world conferences is not on world conferences, but anyway, the state of the world has not gone unnoticed from the international community. There has been a whole string of conferences and summits about our sustainability challenges and what we should do about them. There are 2 groups of world conferences particularly central to the focus of this book. First of all, we have 4 world conferences focusing explicitly on sustainable development dating back more than 4 decades now. Secondly, we have 2 more recent world conferences focusing on managing risk with explicit aim to facilitate sustainable development. So we have brought in risk as a challenge or a barrier to sustainable development. The following sections briefly introduce these world conferences focusing on the development of ideas concerning our sustainability challenges and what to do about them. As usual, social science type courses, a lot of text. I will read the most salient part. So even though here it says section briefly introduces these world conferences, but actually it's quite a bit of text. So I have taken the most salient points according to my own subjective selection again, so you can go back and read the whole book, the whole chapter, which is worth reading if you're interested in the history of things, because in this case the history of the evolution of the idea of sustainability and the actions around them, collective actions around them, must relate to the sustainable development goals and the mitigation efforts with nationally determined contributions and the tunnel vision on global warming targets and carbon reductions, emissions reductions, future scenarios, which often miss the idea of sustainability in its entirety, and adaptation is almost not considered other than some discussions, because the information produced by the models are not at a scale which can really help with adaptation in detail. Okay, spatial scales, temporal scales, their biases, their accuracies, and so on. So let's start with Stockholm, Rio, Johannesburg, and back to Rio. So Rio 1992 and I think 2012. So we'll loop around. Again, I'll just read briefly so you follow up. The World Conferences on Sustainable Development started in 1972, although that term was not used back then. So remember the Brundtland Conference of 1980s and then UNFCCC forming in 1992, I think. So the whole climate change mitigation ideas came later, but sustainability was ahead of it. Of course, it took a back seat because climate change and mitigation started to dominate and still dominates. Okay, they have been held more or less every 10 years, with the exception of 1982, though the World Charter of The World Charter for Nature was approved by the United Nations General Assembly that year, declaring mankind to be a part of nature and that life depends on the uninterrupted functioning of natural systems. So now think about the IPCC process, which releases assessment reports every 7 years with massive resources of people working on simulations and computers being used, energy being spent, and then synthesis being done with a large number of scientists across the world of the latest science on climate change, adaptation, mitigation, impacts, and so on. And a conference of parties is held every year. In contrast, sustainability is being held every 10 years. So maybe we need to think about that a bit more. There has been a whole range of other meetings or summits focusing on aspects of sustainable development, but I'll limit myself to introduce the four main world conferences on our sustainability challenges in Stockholm, Rio de Janeiro, Johannesburg, and most recently back in Rio de Janeiro again. When the Portuguese say it, the Brazilians say it, it almost sounds like Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro. The intonations are very cute, but it's Rio de Janeiro for the English people. Maybe I should jump to Stockholm in the next podcast because this is already 11.5 minutes. So we'll come back and look at the most salient outcomes of each meetings. Again, lots of details there, but I'll keep it briefer than what the book says. It's done in summarizing. Okay,